Hey everyone, I just want to take a quick moment to say thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for all of your support and thank you because we have hit our initial goal of 500 subscribers. Woo! And I couldn't be more grateful and I couldn't have done it without you. So now it's time to set a new goal. My new goal is 1,000 subscribers. I know we can do it. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Don't just watch, participate, become a part of this unafraid, unapologetic, always seeking the truth community. Your support helps us keep the content coming and growing and rocking and rolling. Thank you so much for being with us, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Welcome to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King. This is Extra 106.3, and this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And today we are kicking off our part 2 of our 2-part series on understanding voting blocks. And today we're talking about the Democrats. So before we start the show officially, I have to ask everyone, is everyone okay? Did you make it through Thanksgiving without ending any family relationships or friends? Did you have good friendsgivings? Did you debate politics? What happened? Are you okay? Do you feel like you are now in a great position to um, win over your family members? Where are you? I sure hope you had a great Thanksgiving. I had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and it kind of is the impetus of why I'm talking about this topic, because as we dive deeper and deeper into the holiday season and we are surrounded by family, friends, and more so than we have any other time of the year, I think it's ideal time to connect and let's just face it, in some cases, navigate some of the few challenging conversations that we may have had or plan to have with our family members. We all know how it goes. We can agree on the big issues that matter to all of us, but oftentimes it's those little small details that can stir up the emotions. And this is where understanding the different factions within the political landscape comes into play. And in some cases, we can appreciate the different perspectives of those around us, especially during family gatherings. Last week, we started off by exploring the history of factions, starting with the Republican Party. And we discussed how our forefathers believed that while factions aren't necessarily a good thing, they're kind of unavoidable. And that's part of the reason why we have elections, which is because we need to have something that serves as checks and balances on human nature, not necessarily on people, because every person, you really can't know what the inner thoughts of every single person. However, we do have a nature that is common to man, and being able to understand how to communicate to these factions also helps us to ensure that we're maintaining the accountability and governance that we are supposed to have as citizens. This is our duty, is to make sure that those who we elected to represent us are doing what we asked them to do. So last week, I also shared my thoughts on the divide between Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene, or MTG, and why I think it's vital to remember that while we may align with different factions, we should never place the loyalty above our love for America and the foundational principles that we all stand on. So today, I'm going to wrap up this 2-part series by turning our attention to the factions that are within the Democrat Party, from establishment to socialists and everything in between. And unless you have been completely turned off from politics, you should have noticed that there is a divide that's taking place in the Democrat Party. And it really appears that the Democrat Party has been hijacked by the most radical faction of their party. It's the AOCs, the Jasmine Crockett's, the Ilhan Omar's, and so forth. Then you have the traditional Democrats or the establishment Democrats. You have your Chuck Schumers, your Hakeem Jeffries, your Nancy Pelosi's, etc. But this fight is much deeper than all of that because it's not really about who has the ear and the platform of the party, but it's about who has the power to determine the direction of the party. What do I mean by that? When I listen to Jasmine Crockett and AOC, they're like the loudest in the room. It appears that they have the platform, they have the ear of the party, but Pelosi very much so still holds the power. Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, very much so still holds the power. And I know this because Zoran Mondani said that he was going to support Hakeem Jeffrey as leader if they were to gain a majority. So I absolutely believe that there is a group that has the power, and then there's a group that has the ear and the platform of the base. And now they have to kind of work together in order to get anything done, in order for any faction to move. And that's what you're seeing now is this bit of a tussle between both sides of those factions, trying to figure out who's willing to give up a little bit of power so they can have a little bit more of the platform. Anyway, that is how power lies. That is what this fight is really about. And as a result, establishment Democrats often clash with the progressives and the socialist Democrats over policy priorities, leading to much of the internal conflicts over the party's direction. And this division was evident in this last election cycle, where differing views from issues like climate change and war and healthcare reform all led to public debates among party members and the rise of Zoran. So I'm seeing that this ongoing dialogue that is within the party reflects a broader societal shift that we are now really witnessing amongst our younger voters who are increasingly vocal about their expectations for leaders to take more of a decisive action on pressing issues. And the word that they're using, and this is all on the Democrat side, so keep in mind we're talking about the Democrats, the word that they continue to use is fight. Fight. And for those of us who tend to be more of the onlookers in this fight, these are like us Republicans that are over there just kind of watching. The faction within the Democrat Party serves as a bit of a microcosm of the broader ideological shift that's taking place in America because it's taking place with so many of our young people who will be the leaders in the future. And as we see this evolution sort of unfold, it is essential to remain engaged and to remain informed as voters, as the outcomes will inevitably impact the political landscape from years to come. It's important that we do our duty. So, after the break, we're going to dive in and let's really think about how understanding their beliefs and their motivations of these Democrat factions can really lead to a more productive conversation, even with those that we may not agree with. And at the end of today's show, I'm going to share my insights on where I believe the future of the Democrat Party is heading and why Trump's meeting with Mondani sent a loud message about the future of elections. So you don't want to miss it. We are just getting started. This is the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. Do not leave the table. We'll be right back.
Hello, everyone. My name is Suzanne Guy, and this is the Church's Moment. There is an incredible opportunity to start a distinct pro-life ministry at your church. We started one at our church about 5 years ago, and the fruit has been tangibly beautiful. We do monthly meetings that educate and equip the body of believers on sanctity of human life issues from womb to tomb by bringing in and featuring different pro-life leaders from all over Georgia, as well as featuring different ministries like post-abortion healing ministries or foster care ministries. There are so many great community partners out there. And then the second part of this pro-life ministry is having a care team. This is an opportunity to show moms in crisis, moms in unplanned, unwanted, or crisis pregnancies, that the church is the place to run to, that the church is a safe haven and a place to go for tangible help, real hope, true compassion, friendship, and discipleship. And yes, an opportunity to share the gospel in both word and deed. Brothers and sisters in Christ, will you consider starting a distinct pro-life ministry at your church? It's so easy. Please contact me today to find out how simple this is. You can contact me at my email, proverbs318@att.net. This is the church's moment.
Welcome back to the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. And this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And today's table topic, we are concluding our two-part series on understanding voting blocks, and we are focusing on the Democrats. So we are going to talk about Democrat factions. Now, before the break, I wrapped up our discussion on the importance of understanding the different factions within political parties, and starting with the Republican factions, which we talked about last week, and ending with the Democrat Party, which we are talking about today. And in case you haven't been following, the Democrat Party is currently experiencing a highly watched shift and internal conflict, particularly between the establishment, Democrats, which is your Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, Nancy Pelosi's, and then your more radical, progressive, socialist faction, which are your AOC's, Jasmine Crockett's, and Ilhan Omar's. And it just really seems that the party has been hijacked. Now, for us Republicans, conservatives, we are just observers. So you are watching or listening to this show as an observer. And if you are watching the Democrat Party as a whole, you are an observer. Do not get involved, because we got to let them figure this out. Okay? We are observers of the Democrat factions, but it also serves as a bit of a snapshot of a broader ideological shift that I believe is taking place across America. So we want to be aware. While we're observing, we need to be learning. As before, I have to emphasize that what I am talking about, what I'm getting ready to share, are generalizations. They're generalizations, okay? They stem from my perspective based on my personal interactions and they stem from my perspective based on my personal interactions and observations of each of these factions. And these factions are nuanced. So the individuals within the groups can have varying beliefs and motivations. All I'm saying is that this is my take on it. So as we are going through these factions, please keep in mind that this is not a one-size-fits-all description. I am open to hearing from all of you as well. If I have missed the faction that you feel is extremely important, as I said before, please share your thoughts in the comment section. With that being said, let's jump into these factions. First up, you're obvious, the establishment Democrats. So what exactly defines establishment Democrats? These are your centrists within the party, right? I would say that they are more of your centrists, even though the blue dogs can kind of, we'll get into them, but the establishment tends to be a little bit of a centrist. And they often seek compromise and bipartisan solutions. So today it looks like they just do not exist, but they absolutely do exist, and they will compromise easily for peace, which I believe is their Achilles heel. Generally, they tend to have more of a centrist belief and preferences, which means that they're often positioning themselves somewhere in the middle of the Democrat spectrum, but they're also more of your older Democrats who are more experienced in the political process, which can lend to a certain level of practicality to their approach. So it's like, even though they've been around longer. They've been around a lot longer than the Ilhan Omar's and AOC's and all of them. The establishment Democrats advocate for policies that appear to strike a balance between fiscal responsibility and social welfare programs. They emphasize managing budgets while also addressing the needs of those who are without. So they're trying to see how they can like kind of make everybody happy, which is virtually impossible. And I think that's why a lot of people are frustrated, particularly other factions in their party are frustrated with the establishment, because it's impossible to make everybody happy. You kind of just have to do what's right. And they tend to look for politicians who engage in bipartisan policy making. They expect their leaders to avoid extreme positions that could alienate voters. So you saw Hakeem Jeffries take a long time to endorse Zoran because that's just not necessarily what they do. They seek instead to build a consensus and work towards shared goals, which I think he ended up doing eventually, which was like, I will give you this endorsement, but do not have somebody run against me. Do not come after me. Let's find some type of commonality, some consensus so that we can move forward. That is more of that is certainly the gist of the establishment Democrat. And that's why the socialists hate them. But before we get to the socialists, we got to talk about the blue dog Democrats. So let's move on to the next one. So the blue dog Democrats, these are like your New Deal Democrats who believe that there could be a role for government, but they are not necessarily sold on it. Simply put, they are your more conservative leaning members of the Democrat Party, emerging from conservative or rural districts. These are your let's see. I would say like Liz Cheney, even though there are a lot of people that may say that she's not a Republican at all, but Liz Cheney, Mitt Romney, who is very much so Republican, but I think he could work with the blue dog Democrats. So I'm not going to call him a blue dog, but I can see him working with the blue dog Democrats, right? So overall, their backgrounds influence their political ideologies. They typically value fiscal conservatism and economic common sense. They prioritize responsible budgeting and sensible economic policies to appeal to their constituents. They often place a strong emphasis on national security and law enforcement, which you would find that to be a little bit different than your establishment. I think establishment leans a lot more left when it comes to our law enforcement, but in national security. But these blue dogs are definitely here for it. They've been a little quiet lately on the whole national security and law enforcement, the cartels in the neighborhoods, illegal immigration, gang violence. Haven't said much about that. I digress. However, another general characteristic of blue dogs is that it's their willingness to cross party lines on certain issues. So while they have been a little quiet on these major issues, I will say that they are more willing to cross over and support conservative issues if they see that it makes sense and it's common sense. Many of the blue dog Democrats may hold conservative views on social issues, aligning with the values of the voters in their districts. You can find that these voters typically are in rural areas. So we see a lot of blue dog Democrats in rural Georgia. When I speak with Black people in rural Georgia, you don't know what you're going to get. Like it kind of goes both ways. They are certainly willing to listen to the Republican side more than in the urban areas. And when it comes to the blue dog Democrats' expectations, they tend to look for politicians who are ready to cross the aisle. They advocate for bipartisanship. They believe that working together is essential to crafting policies that truly resonate with the needs of the community. So as you can see on both sides, they are very similar to what I would say are the mountain Republicans. They kind of catch the runoff of poor policy that's being created in the metro areas, and then they live by a different code because their neighbors are all they got. So when big storms hit, they are the last to be serviced in a lot of cases. So they learn how to mind their own business and take care of themselves. And so you will often see some commonality between some of the blue dog Democrats that are in rural areas and the Republicans that are in rural areas. They are politicians. They look for politicians who are realistic, who are authentic, who are ready to work together across the aisle, believing that working together is essential. And they genuinely want to meet the needs of the community. They don't believe all Republicans are bad, or neither are all Democrats. So when you hear people say things like the Dems are not like they used to be, they're talking about the establishment and the blue dogs, that the Democrat Party is not like how they used to be when they were more of the establishment, more of blue dogs. It appears that they have been replaced by a much younger, more energetic, much more passionate and less patient group of voters who tend to call themselves progressives. And that leads us to the next faction. So you have the establishment Democrats, you have the blue dog Democrats. They are kind of similar, so I wanted to start with them. Now let's get into your more passionate Democrats. So the next faction are the progressive Democrats. This is a group of this group of Democrats advocate for progressive policies and reforms, and they tend to be often younger and a little bit more diverse than the other factions. Now, bias alert. I got to interject. I have to disagree with the more diverse, because I do believe that they certainly are diverse when it comes to their different types of progressivisms. Like, I mean, I've met a variety of different types of progressives, but not necessarily diverse ethnically, which is a claim they tend to lean towards. Just because you care about ethnic diversity does not mean that you and your group and your faction is diverse ethnically. The fact of the matter is, I've talked to more Black and brown people who are absolutely against the whole progressive or socialist perspective, but they lean more into the establishment or blue dog Democrats. And when I look at these conferences with these progressives, when I look at the marches and all of their activities, and no kings this and no kings that, it tends to be mostly white people. Just saying. Doesn't give ethnic diversity. So I just want to make sure that that is clear. I think we all can agree that there are people from all kinds of backgrounds within every single party. So I just want to make it clear that I don't think that they are ethnically diverse, but I do think that they are diverse when it comes to, I guess, all their different belief systems and the poly stuff and all the things that they do. But anyway, okay, we're back. Progressive Dems prioritize activism, grassroots organizing, putting social justice and equity at the forefront of their agenda. Progressives support bold social and economic reforms and compassion policies while remaining skeptical of corporate influence in politics. They focus on issues like universal health care, climate change, wealth redistribution, and social justice. They really expect their politicians to push for significant reforms, challenge corporate power, and prioritize the needs of poor citizens, because they believe in equity, meaning we shouldn't be the richest country in the world and still have homelessness. They think that that's a real saying, that where there's wealth, there shouldn't be anyone poor. You know, that doesn't make any sense. That's not even normal, but that is the mindset of a lot of progressives. And they tend to be more forgiving of those who don't contribute rather than those who do contribute. You know, if you read Ayn Rand's book, Atlas Shrugged, she talks about the producers and the moochers. You know, they tend to lean more into the moocher side versus the producer side. But while they are forgiving, they're not as forgiving of the moochers as the next group of voters. So quickly moving on, because we have a lot of factions to get to here. The Democrat Socialists. Whew. So I'm going to quickly explain them, because if you're interested, I did a whole show on the Democrat Socialists of America a few weeks ago, and check that out. So I don't want to go as detailed into the Democrat Socialists, but I do want to make sure I include them because they are most certainly a faction of the Democrat Party. So Democrat Socialists seek to implement socialist principles within the framework of the Democrat system. They're often younger as well, typically our youngest voters to date. They prioritize activism and grassroots organizing just as before. They believe that meaningful change comes from mobilizing the community. They value social justice and equity, just like the progressives, but they're just a stronger, more radical wing of the progressives, advocating for policies that address systemic inequalities, as they call it, and support what they deem as marginalized populations. So they push for significant economic reforms, advocating for public control of major industries and extensive social programs. Their platform includes ensuring that we have universal health care, that we have higher education access and it's free, and that we have comprehensive social safety nets that are also what they consider to be free to the public. They support candidates that push for these bold reforms, the policies that they believe will dismantle the existing power structure in favor of more equitable society, are policies that they want to see their candidates get behind. They want to see their candidates remain skeptical of the corporate influence in politics. They want to see them view it as a barrier to achieving true democracy and fairness. That is the type of leadership that they want. They ultimately want to elect officials to take a strong stand on issues affecting the poor and to prioritize the needs of everyday Americans in their legislative efforts. That all sounds great, right? It sounds all fine and dandy. The problem is their way of prioritizing the poor, bias alert, their way of prioritizing the poor is not to educate them on how to come out of poverty and maintain it, but they just want to pull you out of poverty for the day. That's what at least it appears as. And it's hard to sustain that because you can't keep pulling people out of poverty without them eventually having to sustain and maintain themselves. And then ultimately becoming a contributor to pay back into society because that's an investment that the country is now paying, but they just don't see it that way. So let's progress. Let's progress. No pun intended. So we're progressing to more niche factions, and these are like your single issue, mostly voters, right? So we have niche factions in the Republican Party as well, which we already talked about, like your biblical Republicans. But here, we're going to start with the labor or union Democrats. These are your organized associations of workers who come together to protect and further their rights and interests as workers and laborers. So the labor union Democrats are comprised of individuals bringing together a variety of workers. They value solidarity, collective action. They believe that unity among workers is key to achieving their goals. A major emphasis for them is on job security and benefits. Being able to provide a stable livelihood is crucial for their members. Labor union Democrats are involved individuals with backgrounds in skilled labor or public service, which gives them this unique perspective that I think we all need when it comes to the workforce. Now, typically, they prioritize direct action and they negotiate with their employers to advocate for their members through a hands-on approach. That's why you'll see them picketing and going on strike every once in a while, because that is their direct action. From an onlooker's perspective, remember us Republicans, we're just onlookers. I believe that these voters would be more effective if they got rid of their dear leader, which is like the head of the union, and spoke for themselves, personally. But when it comes to their beliefs, labor union Democrats focus on improving wages, like I said, benefits, work conditions, job security for their members. They are also dedicated to ensuring that there's fair compensation, that there are safe work environments, and they view it as essential rights for all workers. So that is their single issue. If you're pushing that and supporting that, then we're with you. There was a time where I think President Trump got support from some of the labor unions. They look to politicians to prioritize labor issues in their policy agendas. They want to support people who are pro-union and have pro-union legislation and are strong advocates for workers' rights, ensuring that the voices of labor are heard and respected in the legislative process. So our labor/union Democrats, really, they just want job security. Ensure that we have job security. And when you see the progressives and the socialists pushing for AI to start replacing a lot of things or pushing for technology growth, that is scary to this group of voters. And I do believe the Democrat Party will lose them. And I think a lot of these voters are already tipping over to the Republican side for that reason, because we are pushing trades and keeping human beings working in these trades. Moving on. Another niche voter or single issue voter you may meet at the table are your environmentalist Democrats, your Greta Thunberg fans, your earthy, your tree huggers. Not to be confused with your ranchers, who typically are Republican farmers. Personal bias here. These voters tend to care more about protecting nature rather than working with nature, but that is my biased opinion. This is a faction that is dedicated to protecting the environment and promoting what they call sustainable practices. Environmentalists are typically passionate about nature and sustainability, advocating for the preservation of our planet for future generations. They have a deep fear of the world ending due to the actions of humans and our inability to take care of the earth. So they feel like they have to kind of regulate all of us so that we can protect the earth. You'll find them actively engaged in community service or activism, working on initiatives that promote ecological responsibility. They strongly value conservation in a particular way, and the protection of natural resources, often pushing for policies that ensure that we use our resources wisely. A key part of their agenda includes advocating for lifestyle changes like reducing waste and conserving energy to minimize our environmental impact. When it comes to their belief, environmentalists call for strong action on climate change, on the conservation of natural resources, and a transition to renewable energy sources. They see these actions as essential to combating the pressing environmental changes and challenges that we face today. And as for their expectations when it comes to politicians, environmentalist Democrats want to see their politicians implement and enforce strict environmental regulations. They are your EPD's best friend. They support initiatives that promote sustainability, and they expect their leaders to prioritize these issues in their agendas. There has been a uniting force that I've noticed between the environmentalists and the MAHA Republicans, the Make America Healthy Again Republicans, because both of them believe in clean living. They also believe that we should be very natural, and above all things, that we should make sure that what we're putting in our body is clean. I think these voters have done some really good things, particularly the environmentalist Democrats, not necessarily with the Green New Deal and all that stuff. I think that's a little bit of the psychotic side of them. However, when they're holding Big Pharma accountable, when they are fighting the FDA and the CDC and the USDA to hold them accountable and fixing our food, I do think that they kind of kickstarted a awareness of some of these issues that we were facing here in our country. Many people didn't know that there were foods that we are eating that are banned in Europe, Fruit Loops, and I appreciate them for that. But I do think that they take it too far sometimes, in my opinion, because when you start talking about switching everyone to water, sun, and wind energy and letting go of fossil fuels, I think we have some concerns there. That's when I believe we have to draw the line. But I do see where there could be some synergy as long as we respect the earth and versus trying to control it, because we can't. Nature is going to do what nature does, and nature's been around much longer than we have, and it will continue to be around longer than we will. Moving on, next faction. This is the most vocal of these niche, more single issue factions, and it's your social justice Democrats. Now, this is the faction that typically teams up with the progressives or even sometimes the socialists, but they're very focused on their mission. This is the faction of voters who are focused on fighting inequality and promoting civil rights for marginalized communities, which they typically believe are Black, brown, gays, female, so forth. The social justice Democrats strongly value equity and inclusion. They are often very passionate and very actively engaged in community organizing and activism, dedicating their efforts to bringing about change. This group focuses on key areas such as anti-racism, gender equality, and LGBTQ rights. They often utilize a broad approach to justice and equality issues. They are, in my opinion, I feel like the social justice Democrats are no longer really the Black Democrats because they tend to fight for LGBTQ stuff more so. I feel like the Black Democrats are more in the progressive or socialist side now, and they've kind of let the social justice side go to the LGBTQ. But that's just my opinion. Anyway, they are very sensitive to discrimination and the behavior that they believe could be derogatory or discriminatory when it comes to their beliefs. Social justice Dems tend to emphasize their belief on systemic change to address race, gender, LGBTQIA plus rights, and economic disparity. They see these changes as necessary for creating a more just and equitable society. Oh my God, I'm tired of that word, equitable. But then anyway, okay. No bias alert here. I'm gonna pull back. As for their expectations, social justice Dems want politicians to actively support legislation that promotes equity and tackles structural injustices head on. They expect leaders to prioritize these issues, and work towards comprehensive solutions and benefits that benefit their communities. This is the group of voters that I believe comes for the Black conservatives the most, along with the progressives. They kind of team up together. But I feel like they don't think that we care about our people as Black conservatives, that they care more about Black, brown, and gays and females more so than us. And so they think that we just don't know what we're talking about and that we're more out for ourselves and not for the community. And we're taking our Black card and we just all the things, right? But anyway, I personally believe that the misconception exists because there's a different priority level between Black conservatives and Black Democrats. You see, we don't see any group as more important or more special than any other group. We acknowledge slavery and racism, but we see it as something that should be processed through present day emotions rather than the past. We just don't get as emotionally attached to it as some. Meaning, I deal with racism in real time, not in a retrospective way, right? If something happens today, then we got it. But if it's something that happened a long time ago, we're not going to hold on to that. But that can all be addressed, and it has been addressed in a different show. So don't, just go watch that show to hear more about the differences between Black Democrats and Black Republicans. However, I do see that Black Democrats are now kind of mixed in with the progressives, the socialists, and so forth. Moving on. Now that we have all the factions I have encountered on the Democrat side, after the break, I'm going to share where I think the Democrat Party is headed because there has been a huge shift, and so much so that President Trump and Mondani got along. It's kind of interesting. So what's really going on? Why are we seeing this shift? We're going to discuss it all after the break. We're almost finished. You're listening to the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. Don't leave the table. We'll be right back. Hey everyone, I just want to take a quick moment to say thank you. Thank you for all of your support, and thank you because we have hit our initial goal of 500 subscribers. Woo! And I couldn't be more grateful, and I couldn't have done it without you. So now it's time to set a new goal. My new goal is 1,000 subscribers. I know we can do it. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Don't just watch, participate, become a part of this unafraid, unapologetic, always seeking the truth community. Your support helps us keep the content coming and growing and rocking and rolling. Thank you so much for being with us, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Welcome back to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King, and this is Extra 106.3. And this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. In today's table topic, we are understanding voting blocks, concluding our two-part series where we discuss the different factions in the Republican Party, and today we discussed the different factions in the Democrat Party. So if you missed the majority of the show, don't you worry. You can go back and listen, or you can watch the encore episode, which takes place at 9 a.m. on Sunday morning, right here on Extra 106.3. But now I want to close the show by sharing my candid thoughts on the future of the Democrat Party. And let me tell you, it's been a wild ride. You see, the Democrat Party is clearly going through an evolution. And quite frankly, it feels like it was inevitable because it's rooted in the very foundation that I have seen the Democrat Party be built upon. The party's message has always been directed towards voters who feel that they are left behind or that they need a little bit of help, preferably wanting it from the government, wanting the government to step in and say, hey, can you give me a little bit here? Can you help me a little bit here? I just need a little bit of upper hand. And that's not necessarily a negative thing because there are times when the government should get involved to assist. But they welcome socialists and in their ideologies, and they platform people like Bernie Sanders, and a huge turning point that was really apparent when it came to Bernie Sanders was when he almost clinched the nomination for president. But you got to remember, this is when the DNC then intervened to ensure that Hillary got the nod rather than Bernie Sanders. And that only, in my opinion, delayed the shift that was already coming. So since that moment, the party has attempted to retrace its steps from the socialist path. But let's be real, it really didn't last very long because it wasn't sustainable. The party had already been hijacked. So today, the Democrat Party is completely overrun by socialists, by those who are not necessarily anti-communist, by those who could take a little bit of communism, but not necessarily the whole thing, as long as it creates some type of system where we're all eating off of the government, right? Because America's so wealthy, America's so rich, although we're in debt, but we got so much going for us that we should be able to share a little bit with us poor people so that we can get some too. There's no focus on locating opportunities so that you can become a contributor to society. It's mostly let's locate how many ways we can pillage from the government and from society. When that shift took place in the Democrat Party's mindset and mission focus, that's when we saw that the hijacking had officially taken place. It seems that the various factions in the party care more about winning at any cost than about what's best for the country. I feel like they're in this relentless pursuit of defeating Trump that they are willing to compromise, and they have just compromised too much. They've let it all go. They become this ridiculous group of people who are now telling us that there are 56 genders and that men can somehow dilute their testosterone enough to be equal to a woman, and men can now have babies, and they're supporting this stuff that they know makes no sense. But they have no choice because the socialist arm of the party now has the ear of the party. I don't think the Democrat Party will ever look the same again. I genuinely believe that the Democrat Party of today is no longer one from the past, as people have said before. Some might even say the same about the Republican Party, but in our case, the faces have changed, but not our platform. The things that you're mad about that Trump is doing are things that are very Republican. It's very Republican to protect the country and get rid of illegal immigrants that are not supposed to be here. It's very Republican. So the faces change on the Republican side, but the platforms, the foundational principles, we tend to still hold true to that as voters, which keeps it in check. But with Democrats, the voting side has changed. And here's the truth. The policies that we are now seeing that have moved, that we're witnessing on the Democrat side, are entirely unsustainable. History has shown that these ideas and these ideologies have been tried before, they have failed miserably, and regardless of who is implementing them, they're still going to fail. And as a result, the party is going to continue to hemorrhage voters. We're already seeing some of these factions jump ship, as I stated before. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Democrat Socialists emerge as the new face of the party. Matter of fact, I would venture to say that the Democrat Socialists of America may be the party that we see on the ballot going forward. We have already seen it. We're seeing it in our smaller races. It seems like here in Georgia, every single municipal race had at least one Democrat Socialist in it. And a lot of times, these Democrat Socialists made it through the primary almost into a runoff or even won. They're the new Democrat Party. And I truly believe that for Democrats to turn this around, I think Democrats really need to confront uncomfortable truths and admit their hypocrisy. The party as it stands has lost its credibility. And while I vehemently disagree with the socialist policies, I have to respect the fact that those who are advocating for them, I believe they genuinely believe in their policies. What I find frustrating is that the old guard of the Democrat Party now appears fake and like a bunch of gatekeepers. They tend to bring me back to my original message for all voters. They're no longer pushing for policy. They're fighting Trump and they're trying to snatch their party back by compromising, and it's never going to work. But this leads me to my original message that I've been saying for the last few months. This is a message for all voters. Do not get pulled into factions. Remain an individual voter who can think critically, who can choose policies that work, rather than getting caught up in these pipe dreams and these unrealistic promises. We all have a duty to this country. As voters, I encourage you, each and every one of us, to do our duty, to do it thoughtfully, honestly, and to not get wrapped up in one faction. And now it's like, I got to be the president of the faction. I got to elect the president of the faction. No, we are Americans. Regardless of what side of the aisle you sit on, this is our country. Let's take care of it. Until next time, stay unafraid, stay unapologetic, and never stop seeking the truth.